The Appeal of Ron DeSantis. Its author is the chairman of the board of directors over there at the Claremont Institute, who oversees the American mind, Thomas Klingenstein. He joins us here on the program. It's good to have you with us, Thomas. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the title. This is a guy who, a few years ago, very few people knew. If we're being honest, he was kind of a frustrated, unremarkable member of Congress, frustrated conservative in a John Boehner Congress. Runs for governor, wins by fewer than 40,000 votes. And you would think, Thomas, that, every GOP consultant's playbook would be, you got to take it easy. You've got to walk the middle. You've got to raise your favorables. You don't have a mandate, right? You got to think about your reelect. Instead, the dude has decided to go, the Archangel St. Michael right out of heaven here on a white horse, and has just thrown caution to the wind. And in the last few years has done the sorts of things that we've only fantasized about Republicans would do on shows like this, and now may be on his way to cruising to a historic kind of win in a classic swing state like Florida. How did he do it, Thomas? What's the secret sauce here?
I think the most basic thing is he's comfortable in his own skin. He knows who he is. That was one of the hallmarks of Trump. Whatever you thought about his personality, it didn't respond. He wasn't reacting to consultants. He knows who he is. Now, the article that I wrote at the American Mind, that was responding to a fundraising solicitation that DeSantis had made. And most of your viewers know that solicitations of this sort are not very profound, are not very, deep exegesis on policy. But what was distinguishing, I think, about this fundraising email is that DeSantis understands that we're in a war. And that's the most important thing. If you don't understand we're in a war, almost nothing else matters. And by war, I mean that the society that's attacking us, I call them woke communisms, or woke com for short. They have a different understanding of a just society than we do. They think a just society is one where all identity groups are the same. If Blacks are 13% of the population, well, then they should have 13% of the CEOs and the senators and the dishwashers and matriculants to Ivy League schools and everything else you can think of. Well, in America, as we know, a just society is where individuals are free to do what they want to do, to pursue happiness. And that's going to result in outcome differences. Men and women value different things. And so they're going to be represented in society in different proportions. Asians may value education more than other cultures. So they will be disproportionately represented at some of our best schools. And that's true across the board. Now, the thing you have to understand is that if we're going to move, as the woke comms want, from a society built on free individuals where there's going to be outcome inequality, to this utopia where there's outcome equality, that can only be done by force. That requires a totalitarian regime, by which I mean a regime that controls all aspects of public and private life.
So it sounds like you agree with something I've been saying to audiences I've spoken to all over the country this year, Thomas, which is, in the history of the human species, there has never, ever been a peaceable transfer of wealth, property, and liberty from one culture to another, or from one sector of a culture to another, and there never will be. And the other side of this argument has reconciled itself to that and is prepared to go all the way to the mattresses. And we have a responsibility right now, while this civil war is still cold, and we still have a peaceable means to aggressively confront them with the freedom we have. We have to know what time it is. And we have a responsibility in our generation to peaceably but aggressively confront them in that arena. Otherwise, we risk sentencing our children and grandchildren to the other kind of confrontation that they write history books about. Sounds like you might agree with that.
I agree 100%. And I've used the expression knowing what time it is. Oh, I almost said Obama. DeSantis knows what time it is. He understands we're in a war, and you can't win a war unless you know you're in one. And except for Trump, I don't know anybody else who has at least publicly acknowledged that we're in a war. And the thing about DeSantis as compared to Trump, DeSantis can actually explain what he means. Trump understands it, but he's not always a great explainer. And to pick up on your point a little bit, the woke comms are aiming for a utopia, like the Marxists, like the communists, right? And in a utopia, you were asked to give up your freedom for a fantasy. You were asked to give up your own decision-making for decision-making by so-called experts. That's the only way it gets done.
True or false, if you don't mind me asking you a banal question, true or false? We wouldn't have Ron DeSantis as governor without Donald Trump. But in many respects, Ron DeSantis has become the fulfillment of what people hoped for in Donald Trump. Do you think that's true or false?
I think that's a good argument. One way I would look at it is, you know, in business, when we start a business, it requires entrepreneurial talent. But there comes a point when the business is built when different skills are required, a more managerial talent. So I think there's an argument that Trump was right for the times, because he made us understand that we're in a war. We now understand it. That, I think, is because of Trump. Now, if we want to fight it more effectively, and this is the argument for DeSantis, which I'm not convinced of, but which I think is a very plausible argument, that if we want to fight it effectively, then we need someone like DeSantis, who is somewhat of a statesman, who can actually explain, plan, develop strategies. Trump was always good in his gut, but there wasn't a lot of follow through. There wasn't a lot of strategy. And I'm hoping that DeSantis has that plus. He has what Trump had in spades that is absolutely essential, and that's courage. The ability to stand up to all the major political and cultural institutions in America. Very, very unusual. Trump is a towering figure, and DeSantis is the only one I've seen who is a possible replacement, has a lot of his virtues without a lot of Trump's vices.
Let me give you a couple of analogies and see if you think that might also kind of illustrate the point that you're trying to make here. One is a sports one. One is a historical or religious one. In the sports vernacular, that Trump is the pulling guard. Well, ironically, they're both kind of built like offensive linemen. But in this case, Trump is the pulling guard, opening a hole through the line of scrimmage for the guy with the ball behind him to eventually run to daylight. And in a historical religious analogy, I'm not drawing a equivalency. It's an analogy, not an equivalency. But in the analogy, Trump is the voice in the wilderness. He is the forerunner, kind of the crazed figure, if you will, preparing people for the paradigm shift that is to come. Is that kind of a little bit explain what I hear you articulating a little?
Yeah, I think that's very good. Both of those analogies work. Obviously, a running back ain't going to run well unless he's got someone clearing the way. And we're not going to find ourselves from from the wilderness unless somebody can explain where we are. And that's what Trump, as I say, didn't necessarily explain very well, but he showed us. You know, some people say that Trump was very divisive, and I don't buy that at all. I think what Trump did was reveal a divide. And that was the great thing he did. Didn't cause it, revealed it. He showed us this woke, calm society and what a threat it is to America. I would say just one more thing about this. One way I look at this, as simply as I could make it, the other side hates America, we love America. If you hate America, you want to destroy it. If you love it, you want to keep it. And it isn't so much more complicated than that.
So we're on a large national platform, but I live in the state of Iowa. I've been very involved in 10 years of Iowa caucus cycles. I'm very, familiar with the presidential process as a result. And a year from now, it's very likely that we're going to see Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis both in our state at the exact same time running for president. And that actually has a lot of people that also know what time it is, that would think and write a lot like what you've articulated, Thomas. Very nervous that these two guys will destroy each other, or that maybe Ron should wait his turn, and should we try to orchestrate something here? I kind of view it the other way, which is let's put those two guys out there in the battlefield, let them compete, and the worst thing that happens is one of them makes the other guy better. But that's my last question for you. How do you view that vetting process, that sifting process?
No, I agree with you, though my understanding, and I know much less about you than you do about this, but I thought DeSantis might not run if Trump does. But I think if he does, for exactly the reasons that you state, I think it would be very healthy, and we would be able to compare them, and we would be able to see DeSantis on a national stage. It's one thing to be governor. He's done very well. It's very different to be president. And so the more we could see him on the national stage, the better.
It's a great read over at The American Mind, The Appeal of Ron DeSantis, Thomas Klingenstein. Thank you for joining us, Thomas, and phenomenal piece. Really enjoyed reading it. Thank you, man.
Good. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.